They tried to humiliate me. But that morning, when I stepped into the 27th floor, I heard my father's voice in my head, "Baby, never let them take your dignity. Not your worth. Not your fire." And somehow, I knew they were about to test both. So stay with me. Because this isn't just a story about the office, it's about survival. About knowing who you are when the world tries to tell you otherwise. This one's for you. And if stories like this speak to your heart, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. Each floor beeped like a warning. 7, 12, 21. By the time it hit 27, my pulse was louder than the hum of the cables. I looked at my reflection in the chrome. My curls were tight, my lipstick bold. Not because I wanted attention, but because I refused to shrink. When the doors opened, the air smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. Every step toward that glass conference room felt like walking into a courtroom, and today, I was both the defense and the accused. The hallway was full of polite smiles, the kind that say, "Good morning," but really mean, "We're watching." Being the only Black woman in that department wasn't new, but it never stopped feeling loud. Every move I made echoed louder than anyone else's, like I was walking for every woman who'd been told she didn't belong in rooms like this. I could almost hear them whisper, "Hold your head high, baby. You're not just walking for you." So I did. The laughter hit me before I even opened the door. Jason's voice, sharp, controlled, smug. He was already inside, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. The company's golden boy. The one who could mess up a report and still get praised for showing initiative. He turned toward me with that smile that never reached his eyes. "Morning, Aysha. Hope you brought your A game. Big day, huh?" He said it loud enough for the whole room to hear, and the little chuckle that followed told me exactly what he meant. I wanted to roll my eyes, but I didn't. I just smiled, the kind of smile that says, "I see you." Vivens. When I took my seat, the tension sat right beside me. Those glass walls made everything worse. It felt like being under a spotlight, every breath documented, every blink judged. The CEO wasn't there yet, but the team was, tapping pens, checking phones, pretending to prepare. Jason leaned over again, voice low but sharp enough to slice through the noise. "I looked over your data last night. You sure it's solid?" The words were casual, but the intent wasn't. I'd spent months building that campaign, and he knew it. "It's solid," I said quietly. He smirked, leaned back. "Guess we'll see." Sevens. I pressed my nails into my palm under the table to keep from showing it. The anger, the exhaustion, the 1,000 little cuts of moments like this. And in that silence, I heard my father again. "You don't fight with noise, Aysha. You fight with excellence." That's when it clicked. Whatever happened in that room today, I wouldn't give them what they wanted. They wanted a show. They wanted me defensive, emotional, undone. But I wasn't giving them that. I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't flinch. I'd let my work speak, louder than their whispers. At 9 sharp, the CEO walked in. The room straightened, just like that. My heart pounded so loud I was sure someone could hear it. I stood, opened my laptop, and for a moment, everything went quiet. The world slowed down. I thought of the long nights, the corrections, the hours no one saw. I thought of my dad working late shifts, telling me that excellence was our rebellion. I thought, you've done the work. You've earned this. I looked at Jason, met his eyes, and smiled again, calm, unshaken. Then I said, let's begin. Sevens. That was the morning everything changed. Not because I proved them wrong, but because I finally proved myself right. If you've ever walked into a room that wasn't built for you, if you've ever had to stand tall when they wanted you small, you'll understand. This isn't just my story. It's ours. And trust me, it's only getting started. They say every woman has a moment that defines her. For me, it was that Tuesday morning, under the harsh white lights of the conference room, when I realized not everyone in that room came to build, some came to break. Jason stood across the table, his sleeves rolled up, smile practiced like a salesman who already knew his closing line. I could feel it, the tension thick as humidity before a storm. My slides glowed on the big screen behind me, weeks of work compressed into 15 minutes of hope. My heart raced like it always did before a big pitch, but this time, something felt off. He leaned forward, interrupting my opening. Actually, Aysha, he said, voice dripping with condescension. I think we might want to revisit the numbers on that last campaign. You're showing growth, but... He clicked the remote, and suddenly, the screen changed. My deck, my carefully built data, was replaced by his own. A version twisted, cropped, stripped of context. A hush fell over the room. Because from my analysis, he continued, our engagement dropped 12% under Aysha's lead. Maybe her approach isn't aligning with what our audience wants anymore. Sevens. I stood there, frozen. My throat tightened, my palms damp. The room watched, half with curiosity, half with relief it wasn't them. Every word felt like a slap, deliberate, rehearsed. He wasn't questioning data. He was questioning me. For a second, I heard my father's voice, steady, calm, from a lifetime ago. Sevens, when they push you down, don't swing first. Stand tall. Let your truth speak louder. Sevens. So I inhaled and smiled. Jason, I said, my voice softer than I expected. You're right. Data doesn't lie. I clicked the remote back to my original deck. But manipulation does. Sevens. The room gasped, small, sharp, collective. On screen, my real chart appeared. The engagement hadn't dropped. It had risen. 12%. The exact number he had twisted. For a moment, no one moved. Then the CEO leaned back, his eyes darting between Jason and me. Aysha, proceed, he said finally. I did. Every word after that felt like reclaiming space. Every click of the slide was a heartbeat. Every glance from the room, now wide-eyed, alert, was a reminder that truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand. By the time I finished, the air had shifted. Jason wouldn't meet my gaze. The CEO nodded slowly, tapping his pen. Impressive recovery, he murmured, but I didn't need his validation. I already knew what had happened here. Still, when I sat down, my hands trembled beneath the table. Because behind the strength, there was still the sting, the betrayal that came not from strangers, but from someone who had once called me teammate. After the meeting, he caught up to me in the hallway. Nothing personal, he said, shrugging, as if stabbing someone in the back could ever be business. I stared at him. That's the problem, Jason. You think integrity is personal. It's not, it's who you are. When no one's watching. He laughed, low and bitter. Let's see how far integrity gets you here. Sevens, and he walked away. I stood in that hallway for a long time, watching the glass doors reflect back a woman I barely recognized. My jaw tight, my eyes fierce. The kind of look that comes when someone crosses your breaking point and you decide not to break. That night, I went home to my tiny apartment overlooking the city. I didn't cry. I didn't rant. I opened my laptop, rebuilt my slides, analyzed every report, every metric. If he wanted to play dirty, I would win clean. And for the first time, I understood what my father really meant. He wasn't teaching me silence. He was teaching me power. The quiet kind, the kind that doesn't beg to be seen. Because the moment they underestimate you, that's when you become unstoppable. They thought I'd disappear quietly, that I'd shrink after being humiliated in that room. But what they didn't know was, every time life tries to silence a Black woman, she writes her own rhythm and turns pain into purpose. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The city was still asleep, but my mind was wide awake. I poured black coffee into a chipped mug, the kind my father used to drink from before heading to his night shifts. Keep your dignity, baby, he'd said. Even when they try to take everything else. I opened my laptop and started building again. New data, new vision, new edge. While Jason and his crew played office politics, I played the long game. At work, I stayed silent, observant. Every meeting, every whisper in the hallway, every subtle glance that said, "She's done." I collected it all, not as wounds, but as evidence. Because when you're a Black woman in a white-collar battlefield, you learn that revenge isn't shouting across the table. It's outsmarting the system that doubted you. I started coming in early, leaving late. My cube became my war room. Spreadsheets, analytics, strategy decks, each line of code, each data point was a bullet of truth I was loading quietly. Some nights, the janitor would pass by, mop in hand, and say, "You still here, Miss Morgan?" Sevens, and I'd smile. Almost done changing the world? Sevens, but inside, I was exhausted. The kind of tired that lives in your bones. Still, I kept moving. Because every time I thought about quitting, I remembered that boardroom. His smirk. Their silence. My father's voice. Weeks turned into months. I pitched new campaigns, each one sharper than the last. The numbers didn't just rise, they soared. Engagement up 38%. Conversion doubled. My name started appearing in company newsletters. Quietly, people began to notice. Then one day, HR called me in. They wanted me to lead the next quarter's strategy presentation to the board and investors. The same stage where I was once torn down. I nodded, calm on the outside. But inside, I could feel that fire, the one I'd been feeding quietly, finally flicker into something unstoppable. That weekend, I drove out to my hometown. The small brick house where my father used to fix broken radios. I sat by his old chair, the leather cracked, the smell of dust and time still there. "Daddy," I whispered, "you were right. Dignity ain't weakness. It's power in disguise." And I closed my eyes, letting the silence answer back. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this story. If it spoke to you, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that inspire and empower. When I returned to the city, I was different. Focused. steady. Every morning, I looked in the mirror and repeated it like a prayer, like a mantra, like a spell I had to cast on myself to survive in a world that seemed determined to erase me. You don't need their approval to be undeniable. I traced the lines of my jaw, straightened my shoulders, adjusted the collar of my navy blazer, and let the reflection stare back at me with a fire I was learning to control. Some days, it flickered like a candle in the wind, but it never went out completely. Not anymore. Jason noticed. He always noticed. That thin smirk, the way he lingered a little too long by my desk, pretending it was casual, pretending it was friendly. But I could see the tension behind the act, the way his hand hovered over the stack of reports, the slight twitch in his smile when I didn't flinch. One afternoon, he passed by while I was typing an email and said, "You've been working late a lot." His tone was light, teasing, but it carried the weight of someone used to having control. I looked up at him, calm, steady, eyes locked with his. Success has a curfew. Failure doesn't. My voice was soft, almost conversational, but every word landed like a brick. For a brief second, his smirk faltered. I could see it, the shift. The recognition that he no longer held the leash he thought he had. The night before the big presentation, I stayed at the office long after everyone else had gone. The city outside stretched in veins of gold and white light through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a network of possibilities, of power, of paths I had carved for myself without asking permission. I sat alone, my slides ready, my data airtight, my notes organized, but more importantly, I prepared my voice. The calm, confident, unwavering tone of a woman who had been overlooked, underestimated, and belittled, and had survived. I rehearsed the opening line, the way I would emphasize key points, how I would command attention without shouting, how I would own the space before I even stepped into it. Because the truth was, I already belonged. I had built half of what they credited themselves with. I was the invisible engine behind their so-called brilliance. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and let the silence fill the room. The faint hum of the air conditioner, the distant sirens from the street, the soft vibrations from the trains passing below, they all seemed to echo my heartbeat. I whispered to the empty office, "You wanted a show, Jason? I'll give you one." My heels clicked against the marble floor as I walked toward the door, each step deliberate, a drumbeat of defiance wrapped in grace, announcing that I was no longer invisible. They had tried to bury me in silence. They had tried to erase me, but they forgot. I was the sound. I was the presence they could not ignore. I was the tension in the air before the storm. And if revenge was a dish best served cold, I decided mine would be warm, plated perfectly, seasoned with every eye in the room watching, every doubt I had faced, every sleepless night I had endured. That morning, the office hummed with whispers, electric and alive. Everyone knew the board presentation was today. Everyone knew I'd been chosen. And everyone, including Jason, was waiting, holding their breath to see if I would falter, to see if the fire they tried to extinguish had burned me down. I arrived early. The lobby was empty, except for the soft echo of my heels against polished stone. I wore navy, the color of storms that don't need thunder to make their presence known, the color of quiet power. My blazer was sharp, my hair sleek, my pen ready. Every sound, the click of my heels, the hum of the elevator, the rustle of papers, reminded me of how far I had come since the day they laughed, mocked, and tried to humiliate me. By the time the boardroom filled, I could feel their eyes on me, polite smiles, subtle curiosity, the occasional glance tinged with doubt. The CEO sat at the head of the table, flanked by executives with pens poised, eyes calculating, evaluating. Jason was there, feigning support, his smirk tight, nervous. I greeted the room. "Good morning," I said, steady. "Thank you for being here." My voice was calm, professional, but each word carried the weight of months of preparation, of battles fought in silence. Inside, my pulse was wild, my heart hammering like a drum, but my face didn't betray it. Because when you've walked through fire, you learn how to look calm while burning. I reminded myself of the nights I stayed at my desk until the city was silent, of every insult and slight I had endured, of every time I had been told I wasn't enough. All of it had led to this moment. I was ready. I had to be. As I clicked the first slide, I let my gaze sweep across the room. Polite nods. Slight frowns. Pens poised. Eyes searching for weakness. And then I spoke, measured, confident. Let's start with the foundation of this proposal. My voice cut through the tension, precise and deliberate, commanding attention. And with every chart, every data point, every insight, I felt the room lean in, compelled, unable to ignore what I had built. Jason shifted in his seat, jaw tight, pretending to take notes. But I could feel it, the weight of his awareness. The realization that the shift was permanent, that the power he thought he held was no longer his to claim. I spoke without hesitation, without apology, without the tremor of doubt. The invisible engine had become the visible force, and they all knew it. By the time the last slide appeared, the room was still. Not tense, not hostile, but captivated. Every eye fixed on me. Every subtle murmur stopped. The silence was mine. Not empty, but full of presence, of undeniable truth, of a fire that had been contained too long and was finally unleashed. I closed the presentation, held my head high, and let the room absorb it. My pulse slowed, my breath evened. I had done more than survive. I had arrived. And in that moment, I realized something. The world may have tried to define me, diminish me, and erase me, but nothing, no one, could take away the undeniable truth of who I was and what I had accomplished. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this story. If it spoke to you, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that inspire and empower. The lights dimmed, and the hum of the projector filled the room. My first slide appeared, casting a soft glow across the polished faces of executives. I took a breath, letting it anchor me. This is it. This is the moment. This quarter, I began, my voice steady, each word deliberate. We didn't just grow, we evolved. Lavians, click. Slide 2. Numbers glowed on the screen, precise, undeniable. The kind of numbers that make you pause, take notice. While others were watching engagement rates, we were studying human behavior. And what we found changed everything. Sevens. I felt it then, a subtle shift in the air. Chairs leaned forward. Fingers paused mid-note. Eyes that had once glanced at me with polite indifference now followed my every movement. The room was awake. Consumer loyalty isn't just about product, it's about representation, I continued, letting the words sink in. Our audience doesn't want perfection. They want truth, real stories, real voices. Sevens. I paused, letting the silence stretch, the kind of silence that hums with expectation. The faint rustle of papers, the distant tap of a pen, it all became a rhythm to my words. Then, with a single click, a new slide appeared. Photos of campaigns I had built quietly, painstakingly, the ones leadership had overlooked, the ones that had gone viral first in niche communities, the ones that had made people stop scrolling and feel seen. Each image, each frame, told a story of unseen effort, of work done without applause. "Here's what authenticity looks like in data form," I said, voice calm, measured, but with a sharp edge that cut through any doubt. This campaign, launched specifically in underrepresented markets, outperformed every mainstream ad we ran last year. "Sevens." The CEO leaned forward, eyebrow arched. "By how much?" "Sevens." I smiled, almost imperceptibly, letting it carry the quiet weight of truth. 82% higher engagement, 40% lower cost. "Sevens." A ripple passed through the room, soft gasps, murmurs, exchanged glances. For the first time, the room felt like it belonged to me. Every skeptical gaze, every subtle smirk, was being replaced with recognition. Jason shifted in his seat, a flicker of panic crossing his face, though he tried to hide it. "Wait, those were test campaigns, right? You didn't—" "Sevens." I turned to him slowly, deliberately, letting my eyes hold his. "I did," I said, voice low but steady, every syllable carrying the weight of months of unseen work. Because while some of us were debating who deserved credit, others were out there doing the work. "Sevens." The room went completely silent. Not the polite, empty kind of silence, but the heavy, tense silence that feels like it's holding its breath. Every pen paused mid-air. Every phone stayed in its pocket. Every eye was locked on me. I let the silence breathe a moment longer. Then I continued, layering in the next slide, the next insight, each piece of data, a hammer striking the foundation of every assumption they'd made about me. Engagement statistics, market reach, demographic penetration, emotional resonance, all laid bare, undeniable, impossible to argue with. I caught the subtle movements in the room, the CEO's fingers tapping lightly on the table, a slight nod of approval from the head of marketing, a flicker of disbelief in Jason's eyes. I smiled again, softer this time, but filled with quiet satisfaction. "The work doesn't lie," I said, letting the words hang. "Results don't lie. And neither do the people doing the work when no one's watching." "Sevens." The room held its breath. Then, slowly, acknowledgment spread, subtle but undeniable. A shift in energy, from doubt to respect, from skepticism to the awareness that everything I had claimed wasn't just talk, it was reality. And in that moment, I knew. The game had changed. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer the background engine. I was the force moving the entire boardroom forward, and everyone, whether they liked it or not, had to recognize it. I advanced the next slide. A short video played, clips of diverse families, children, workers, laughter, strength. My voiceover echoed through the speakers. "This is America as it truly looks. Not the filtered version, but the one we live every day." Sevens. When the lights came back up, you could have heard a pin drop. The CEO folded his hands. "Who led this initiative?" "Sevens." Jason opened his mouth, but I spoke first. "I did." "Sevens." Our eyes met, his wide with panic, mine steady with grace. He laughed nervously. "You can't possibly think." Sevens, I clicked again. On the screen appeared a time-stamped email chain, approval receipts, and my signature on every major milestone. Documentation matters, I said softly. Integrity matters. Sevens. The CEO leaned forward, studying the screen. Then he looked at me. Aysha, this is extraordinary work. Sevens. Thank you, I said. But it's not just mine. It belongs to every person who ever got told they were too much, too loud, or not enough to sit at this table. Sevens. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Jason sank lower in his chair. Then the CEO smiled. We'll be expanding this campaign nationwide. And, Aysha, I want you leading it. Sevens. My chest tightened, but not from nerves this time. From pride. From relief. From the quiet sound of justice landing. I nodded. I'll make sure it represents everyone. Truthfully. Sevens. The meeting adjourned. The room buzzed with congratulations, handshakes, polite smiles. But I only noticed one thing, Jason slipping out, fast, like someone trying to outrun their own guilt. When I stepped outside, the hallway light felt softer somehow. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Because revenge wasn't in the clapbacks or the confrontation. It was in the silence that followed, the kind of silence that comes when truth finally wins. I walked back to my office, heels steady, chin high. My father's words echoed again. Sevens. Dignity isn't quiet, it's just powerful enough not to scream. Sevens. That day, I didn't just turn the tables. I built a new one. And this time, everyone had a seat. They don't tell you that winning comes with silence, the kind that doesn't feel peaceful, but heavy, like the air before rain. Everyone congratulated me that day. My inbox flooded with praise. My name echoed down the halls that once whispered doubt. But behind every, "You did great," there was something else. Something unspoken. Jason didn't show up the next morning. HR said he'd taken a personal leave. I knew what that meant. He was gone. Maybe not fired yet, but the kind of gone where your keycard stops working and your name slowly fades from the door. People started treating me differently. Suddenly, I was the one to watch, the voice of change. But I could feel it, the mix of respect and resentment that follows every Black woman who rises too high, too fast. They wanted to celebrate me, but not sit too close. They wanted to praise my courage, but not ask how much it cost. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this story. If it spoke to you, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that inspire and empower. The truth? It cost everything. Sleep, trust. The version of myself that once believed hard work was enough. One night, about a week later, I stayed late again. Old habits die hard. The office was empty except for the hum of the air conditioner and the faint buzz of the city below. I walked past the conference room, the same one where I'd been broken, rebuilt, and reborn, and stopped. I looked at the long glass table, the black chairs, the faint reflection of city lights dancing on the walls. I could still hear that moment, the laughter, the tension, my father's voice. Keep your dignity, baby. Sevens. And I realized revenge wasn't the victory. Growth was. Because the real win wasn't proving Jason wrong. It was proving myself right. I sat down at the head of the table, the chair that once felt too big, too far away. It fit now. Not because they gave me permission, but because I'd earned it. That weekend, I went back to the community center where I used to volunteer before work took over my life. There were young girls there, braids, notebooks, big dreams, and one of them recognized me from a company post online. "Miss Aysha, you're the lady who made that ad about real people, right?" "Sevens?" I smiled. "Something like that." "Sevens." She grinned. "I want to do what you do. I want to tell stories, too." Sevens. And in that moment, something inside me healed. Because maybe that was the point all along, not revenge, not pride, but representation. The kind that tells every little black girl, you belong in every room they said you didn't. When I left, the evening light painted the sky gold. I stood on the curb, watching it melt into the horizon. The city was loud again, alive again, and for the first time in a long while, so was I. A few days later, the CEO called me into his office. He said the board wanted me to lead a new diversity initiative. I laughed softly. "You mean an authenticity initiative?" "Sevens." He smiled. "Exactly." Sevens. I walked out of that office with my chin high. I wasn't just leading a campaign anymore. I was shaping a culture where women like me didn't have to shrink to fit in, where truth wasn't punished but amplified. That evening, as I packed up to leave, I noticed something on my desk, a small, unmarked envelope. Inside, a note in Jason's handwriting. "You were always better than me. I just couldn't handle it." I folded it quietly, slipped it into my drawer, and whispered, "I forgive you." Sevens, not because he deserved it, but because I did. I walked out into the night, the air cool against my skin, the city humming beneath my heels. Every sound, every light felt different now. Brighter, fuller. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't fight back, it's rise above. And maybe that's what my father meant all along. Dignity isn't silence. It's the roar that lives inside quiet strength. So here's to every woman who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed. Here's to the ones who turned humiliation into history. We don't wait for seats anymore. We build our own tables. And when we do, Sevens, we make damn sure everyone eats. They said I should know my place. And for a long time, I believed them. Because when you're a black woman walking into a room full of power, the air shifts, the tone changes, the smiles turn tight, and the eyes start measuring your worth before you've even spoken. But that morning, as the elevator doors slid open to the 27th floor, I whispered to myself, "You belong here, even if they don't see it yet." Sevens. The floor smelled like coffee and ambition, the kind that burns more than it brews. People in press suits, heels clicking like metronomes of control. And there she was, Cynthia Moore, Senior VP, flawless, cold, and always 10 steps ahead in her mind. Her perfume hit you before her words did. She walked into the conference room like she owned gravity. I was still arranging printouts when she said, "You'll be taking notes today, right?" Sevens. The room went still. I wasn't on the agenda, but neither was her disrespect. I felt 12 pairs of eyes on me, waiting to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. I smiled, sat down, and opened my notebook, but in my head, I was writing something else. One day, this moment will be my origin story. Sevens. That's how it started. Every day after that, she tested me. The accidental last-minute emails, the credit she took, the praise she redirected. when I spoke. She cut me off mid-sentence. We'll circle back to that. Sevens. We never did. She'd invite the team to after-work drinks, except me. They'd laugh in stories I wasn't part of. And in meetings, when I did speak, she'd tilt her head with that soft, patronizing smile that said, "You tried, sweetheart." Sevens. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just surviving her game. I was studying it. At night, while she was sipping wine somewhere in her penthouse, I was sitting at my kitchen table, under flickering fluorescent light, rewriting proposals, rechecking data, mastering every number she once said I wasn't ready to handle. Sevens. My walls were covered in sticky notes, charts, and deadlines. The hum of my fridge was my applause. And then, the pitch. The one that could shift everything. A $40 million partnership. Cynthia wanted it more than breath, but I'd already built the bones of it. Quietly. Perfectly. When she told me, "You'll assist me on this one," I nodded. But inside, I was thinking, no, Cynthia, I'm the reason this deal will exist. Sevens. I spent 3 weeks locked in work, spreadsheets, call notes, strategy drafts, storytelling decks. I crafted it like a gospel. Every line had rhythm. Every figure had faith. And when I finally showed it to her, she said one thing. "Good work. I'll make the adjustments and take it from here." Sevens. The adjustments were erasing my name. The morning of the pitch, I showed up early, only to find out she'd already gone in. The receptionist whispered, "They moved the meeting up." Sevens. My chest tightened. I rushed to the glass room and saw her, standing in front of my slides. The same flow. The same story. The same line I'd stayed up all night writing. We don't just sell solutions, we build trust. Sevens. Applause thundered. She bowed her head slightly, graceful, confident. And then her eyes met mine through the glass wall. She smiled. It was the kind of smile that says, "Stay in your place." Sevens. I walked out before they could see my tears. That night, I didn't cry long. I got angry. And then I got strategic. I found every version of that presentation, every timestamp, every late-night edit stored in my drive. I called Jamal, an old friend now working at a consulting firm we often competed with. I sent him everything. Told him to look at the metadata. He didn't ask why. He already knew. 3 days later, a rumor spread through the building like wildfire. Cynthia's being audited for misconduct. Sevens. By Friday, her glass office was empty. No goodbye email. No farewell lunch. Just silence and the faint scent of her perfume fading from the carpet. That Monday, HR called me in. The senior board sat there, all suits and uncertainty. "We've reviewed the materials," one of them said, "and it's clear the success of the pitch was yours." Sevens. I waited, hands still, heart steady. Then came the words I'd dreamed of but never chased. Sevens. "We'd like you to lead the division." Sevens. I didn't smile right away. I thought of every night I questioned myself, every time I swallowed disrespect to keep the peace. Then I nodded, slow and calm. When I walked into that same conference room, everything looked smaller. The table, the faces, even the fear. I placed my pen down, just like before, and said, "So, you want me to take notes or make history?" Someone laughed nervously. I didn't. That afternoon, I ordered the framed white suit from Cynthia's old office to be placed in the hallway, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Because sometimes you don't destroy the memory of those who doubted you. You display it quietly, powerfully. Now, I don't go to after-work drinks to be included. I go when I choose. I don't shrink my voice in meetings. I speak, and the room listens. And every time a new Black woman walks into the office, nervous, guarded, eyes searching for safety, I make sure to meet her gaze and say, "Sevens, you belong here. Don't let them tell you otherwise." Sevens, because that's the real victory. Not just taking the seat at the table, but pulling out another chair for someone else. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It's peace. It's power. It's walking through the same door they once tried to close. Sevens. And realizing it opens only for you now. Don't wait for them to hand you a seat. Build your own table. And when you do, make sure there's room for the ones coming after you. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this story. If it spoke to you, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that inspire and empower. They say the higher you climb, the lonelier it gets. I thought I understood that. I thought I had my circle, my people, my team, my allies. But I was wrong. It started with Lila Thompson. Smart, ambitious, and charming. The kind of person who makes you think, finally, someone who gets me. I took her under my wing when I became division lead. I shared strategies, guided her through tricky clients, even let her present alongside me in a small pitch meeting. I thought she was my partner in change, until the morning the board called me in. The room was colder than I remembered. Lights harsh, chairs too tall. And there she was, Lila, sitting confidently, her laptop open, a smug smile on her face. The CEO looked at me first, polite but firm. "Aysha, we need to talk about the data from the East Coast Initiative." Sevens. I blinked. Confused. Yes, I compiled it, presented it, verified. Sevens. The CEO held up a hand. "This report, it seems there are discrepancies." Sevens. I froze. Discrepancies? My numbers were perfect. Every slide, every statistic double-checked. Then Lila spoke, her voice calm, deliberate. "I took the liberty of refining Aysha's report for clarity," she said. And as she clicked through the slides, every number I'd validated, every insight I'd earned, twisted. She made it look like I hadn't done the work. She made it look like I had failed. The room murmured. I could feel my chest tighten, heat rising like a storm behind my ribs. All the months of hard work, every sleepless night, every strategic call, reduced to a story where I looked incompetent. And the worst part? The CEO nodded along. "I see. We'll need to reassign leadership on this project." My world tilted. Not because I feared losing my position, I feared losing the truth. Because betrayal cuts deeper than failure. It cuts through your heart before anyone else notices. I excused myself. My hands shook, gripping the doorframe. The hallway was empty. The fluorescent lights flickered like a heartbeat, fast and uneven. I sat on the floor outside the room and let it hit me. Someone I trusted had undermined me. From within. But then, I remembered my father's voice. Con. Dignity isn't quiet. It's strong enough to stand even when the world tries to crumble you. I stood, clenched my fists, and smiled, not because I felt victorious yet, but because I realized something crucial. Betrayal can be a weapon, and I just learned how to wield it better. Over the next week, I watched Lila closely. Not angrily, not vindictively, carefully. Every email she sent, every client call she made, every boast she let slip to the wrong person. And then I struck. I requested a private session with the CEO. I walked in calm, measured, the kind of calm that hides a storm. I laid out every email thread, every timestamp, every document showing that the East Coast Initiative was my work from start to finish. I showed how her edits had introduced errors, subtly, so only someone paying attention could see. And I showed how she had presented it as her own in board updates. The CEO's eyes widened. The room went quiet. Lila, in the corner, froze. By the end, the board didn't just reinstate me. They reassigned Lila to a training role, away from client strategy, and placed me in charge of mentoring the entire new team. When I walked out, I didn't smile. I felt the sting of betrayal still in my chest. But I also felt the fire of truth, burning brighter than resentment. That evening, I went back to my apartment. The city lights spilled across the floor. I poured myself a glass of wine, stared out the window, and whispered, "Pain teaches better than praise ever could." Sevens, because the lesson wasn't just about surviving betrayal. It was about understanding it, about transforming hurt into strength, about turning someone else's deceit into proof of your own power. I thought of the girls I mentor. I thought of every young Black woman who walks into a room and is told she doesn't belong. I realized something. The betrayal doesn't define you. How you respond, that defines you. And for the first time since Lila's knife had been turned, I felt untouchable. Because now, not only did I have the table, I had the map of the room. I knew every corner, every shadow, every chance for someone to try the same trick again. And next time, I wouldn't just stand my ground. I'd rise higher. And that's what power feels like. Not the absence of betrayal, but the mastery of it. I learned something that day. Not from victory, not from betrayal, but from the space between the two. The silence after the storm, the quiet that forces you to look inside. Truth matters more than approval, more than recognition, more than applause. Because in the corporate world, in life, people will try to define you, box you, diminish your worth. They'll smile in your face while plotting your downfall. They'll take credit for what you built. They'll whisper lies, create doubt, manipulate perception. And yet, none of it matters if you hold on to your own truth. I think about my father's words every day. Con, always keep your dignity. Even when they try to steal it, it's yours to keep. Sevens. At the time, I didn't fully understand. I thought dignity meant being polite, being small, being safe. Now I know. Dignity is a roar. It's standing tall when the room is against you. It's speaking your truth even when no one is listening. It's doing the right thing, not the easy thing, not the politically correct thing, not the thing that guarantees praise. I want the young women I mentor to understand this. I want them to see that being Black, being a woman, being underestimated. It's not a weakness. It's the training ground for excellence. You see, success built on deceit or shortcuts is fragile. Success built on truth, on integrity, lasts. It sustains you when betrayal hits. It strengthens you when the world doubts you. And it inspires others to rise alongside you. I still think about Cynthia Moore. I still think about Lila Thompson. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with clarity. They taught me, without knowing, that leadership is not just about holding the table. It's about knowing why you sit there, who you bring with you, and how you carry yourself when others try to pull the chair away. I see every young black girl walking into a room like I once did, uncertain, cautious, scanning for threats, doubting herself before anyone else can. I want her to know, Sevens, you are not here to shrink. You are here to expand, to shine, to be undeniable. I remember my first big pitch, trembling, fearing I wouldn't be enough. I remember the night Lila betrayed me, thinking the ground had fallen beneath my feet. I remember the silence of the empty conference room after Cynthia's departure. And I see now, every moment of doubt, every sting of betrayal, every long night of work without recognition, it all led to this. To me, standing here, whole, powerful, and unbroken. The lesson, it's simple, but it's hard. Be truthful. Work with integrity. Stand firm in your dignity. Don't let someone else define your worth. And never, ever apologize for rising. Because people will try to stop you. They'll try to shame you. They'll test your patience, your limits, your courage. But if you hold fast to your truth, you will rise. Not just above them, above fear, doubt, betrayal. And when you do, you create a path for everyone coming after you. I think about my team now, the women I lead, the colleagues I inspire. I tell them, don't wait for permission. Don't shrink for comfort. Don't sit quietly while someone else takes credit for your brilliance. Rise, every day, in every way, and bring someone else with you. Sevens. That's the real victory. Not revenge, not recognition, not even success. It's legacy. It's impact. It's the truth that lives after you leave the room. And if you ever doubt it, remember this, Sevens. Every time someone tried to erase me, I remained. Every time someone tried to diminish me, I expanded. Every time someone tried to silence me, I spoke louder, with clarity, with strength, with heart. Truth is louder than lies. Dignity outshines disrespect. And effort done right, with intention, courage, and honor, never goes unnoticed. So here's my message, not just for me, but for every Black woman, every young person stepping into a room that wasn't built for you. Sevens, take your seat. Own your power. Let no one's betrayal shake your foundation. Let your work, your truth, and your heart be undeniable. Because when you rise like that, quietly, fiercely, deliberately, Vince, the world doesn't just notice, it remembers. And that, my friends, is how you turn corporate storms into personal triumphs. Stand tall, speak your truth, work with integrity, hold your dignity, and every time someone tries to push you down, rise stronger and make sure you leave a seat at the table for the next one who needs it.